Hi, this is I think, third part of my myths about mathematics. And today I'm going to talk about the myths of mathematics as neutral, which has been a really hot topic for a long, long time. And I'm just going to share some of my quick thoughts on it. Enjoy. Okay, so people like to say that math is neutral. They also like to say that they don't use politics in the math classroom because math is neutral. It's just about numbers, et cetera, et cetera. But is that true? So I think what a lot of people mean when they say mathematics is neutral is they mean that numbers or objects, mathematical objects, are neutral. So as an object on a screen or on a board, maybe they're thinking about mathematics as being neutral. It's just a number. It's just a thing that we're looking at and we're all interpreting the same way, so they think. And so how can it not be neutral? But we see lots of examples, and particularly with recent COVID numbers and data, about mathematics and statistics in particular being used to prove a point or share a certain perspective. So here's old data that was shared on a news program about unemployment levels by a random quarter. And this was shared on years ago on a news channel. And so you can see, look at this nice curve or piecewise function, if you want to think about it like that. So here's the original data it came with. So you might think with your students, why would somebody show that graph in the top left versus the original graph here, where you can see where they pulled the points from the various quarters and smoothed out the curve? So you might think about, what was the purpose? How is math being used or weaponized in a particular way in this instance to show a different point or to push some perspective? Why would you want to smooth out some of those peaks and valleys on this graph? And we see this a lot. And we also see things where we see algorithms being used and having a lot of bias built into them from the development standpoint. So this was about a year ago when we started seeing the Apple Card having gender issues where women were getting lower credit lines than men, even married partners that had the same financial statistics. And so this made a lot of headlines at the time. And then we see more serious consequences of such algorithm programs where we saw that Black Americans and Black people in general are being affected by racial bias in healthcare algorithms. So this is a case where we see bias sneaking into mathematics as causing people to lose their lives or lose healthcare, which is important to everyone. So we might say that algorithms are numbers and they can't be racist because they're numbers, or they can't be biased because they're numbers. But we have to remember that mathematics and algorithms are made by people, and people have all kinds of biases. Now, this gets even more iffy and dicey as we move forward when we're thinking about algorithms that are right now in process. So if you think about self-driving cars, and this has been written a lot about and also talked about a lot, is people are going to design the algorithms, already have in fact, design the algorithms for self-driving cars. Self-driving cars have to make decisions about who to protect. Do they protect pedestrians or do they protect the consumer that bought the car? And companies get to make these decisions, and they're also going to make all kinds of decisions because the car will be able to see who they might hit. So do you hit somebody that's a child who doesn't contribute to society, or do you hit the millionaire that has a lot of money? People are going to be making these decisions. And if they're my future students or my current students making these future decisions, I want them to think about the ethics of such decisions as they go in. And I also want them to combat any biases that they have to the extent possible. So there's going to be a lot of checks and balances, and there's going to be a lot of conversations about the ethical use and creation of algorithms moving forward. So this starts really early. So this is an example that sticks out to me for this day. I was working with some elementary students, and I gave them the problem that you baked 8 cookies with your mom and your grandma. So you're the kid and you baked 8 cookies with your mom and your grandma. And this is a common task in math education. And you say, how do we share these cookies fairly? And so when you ask this question of students, and I did it with first graders, second graders, and third graders, I asked them this question. They actually come up with a lot of interesting questions and ideas. So if you have kids at home, you can ask them this question, think about the things they raise. But they said things like, well, grandma shouldn't have any cookies because she's diabetic. And they said things like, well, mom made them or like spent the most time making them, so maybe she should get more. When we do problems like this and these real world aspects come out of these problems with our students, we actually should engage them in these issues. This is like thinking about the ethics of the situation. The reason we give a real world problem is to bring in real world knowledge. And so if our students start doing that and we shut them down, we're shutting down really important conversations that I hope the people who are programming self-driving cars are thinking about as well. Now, not only is math not neutral in terms of like the development of algorithms, the use of graphs and displays of data, things like that, because we are humans after all. And if we're humans using something, it is going to be used in ways that are self-seeking in many options or many times. It's also a gatekeeper, and this has been well established. So in the book Radical Equations, Moses and Cobb talk about in today's world, and this was from 2001, in today's world, economic access and full citizenship depend crucially on math and science literacy. I believe that the absence of math literacy in urban and rural communities throughout the country is an issue as urgent as the lack of Black or registered Black voters in Mississippi in 1961. So you can think about why might they have written this? Why would math literacy be such a big deal? And once you dig in, you start to see why it is such a big deal. Now, I will say, because many of you are mathy, you will know that a lot of these studies are correlational studies that I'm going to share. But it stands to fact still that like the more mathematics that you study, generally the higher your wages are over your career. And that makes sense, right? Because a lot of careers require higher level mathematics, or they require college degrees, which means you had to make it through all the algebras and geometries in high school to get into college. You also had to take like GRE if you're doing graduate studies, which has a math portion. You had to take the SAT. So math is a gatekeeper in a lot of ways. You get tracked in mathematics very early on now. Sometimes as early as kindergarten, kids are getting tracked into the high class and the low class, which is tragic. Because I don't know why you would ever track a kindergarten student. But we need to stop thinking about tracks, and we need to instead afford everyone opportunities so that we're not shutting off avenues if students decide later in life that they want to do something. So there's been lots of studies about this that show that, for example, this one shows that advancing past Algebra 2 correlates strongly with finishing high school. That's probably because a lot of schools require Algebra 2 to complete high school. But again, it's a correlation, but it's showing like these math classes are necessary to get to a higher level career. And the reason is because, you know, you have to finish high school to get to college. Typically you could take the GRE in some instances, but you also have to take standardized tests that rely on mathematics a lot as well. And there's been some other articles like Beatty 2015, where he looked at the lifetime earnings or the average earnings after 10 years after graduation. And you can kind of see based on what your highest math class is, what your average earnings were for your 10 years after high school. I will say again, it's correlation. We don't know that it's the cause, but we know, you know, the highest level of mathematics you take is highly correlated with your education levels, etc. So mathematics is not only not neutral, but it also like serves as a gatekeeper. It holds people back, and it's also being used in some instances in ways that like result in the death of people and further marginalization of communities. So I think we need to stop saying math is neutral and instead think about like how people use mathematics and start building in the ethical use of mathematics into our classes as early as fair sharing tasks in elementary school. So I hope you found this helpful, and share what you think in the comments.